A study released by the City and County of Denver has identified 16 buildings that they say are good candidates for adaptive reuse. Well, the practice of adaptive reuse is repurposing buildings that have outlived their original intent. The study looked at the potential of converting high-rise office buildings into residential units. The concept not without challenges, though, as you might think. So let's talk about it more with Chris Rourke. She's the managing editor of the Denver Business Journal. So let's take a look at this study. I think when you think about it quickly, making an office building into a residential building sounds easy, but there's a lot at stake there. There's a lot that has to be done.
Well, it sounds like this big, great idea, right? Why not? We've seen office vacancy, rise, and we certainly need housing, not just affordable housing, housing in general. So the City and County of Denver just released a study within the last few weeks. It's done by a San Francisco firm, Gensler, and they looked at, a bunch of the buildings in the core of downtown. They identified 16 buildings that would make good candidates for conversion. And they've looked at a various numbers of factors. They determined that they could maybe create 5,000 units downtown, just if you converted all of these 16 buildings.
Well, and some of these are well-known buildings to people, like Republic Plaza and others. But you'd still have to, like we were talking about, there's plumbing, and I mean, it's not like you can just overnight say, there's an apartment.
Right, these are well-known buildings, but how much better would it be to keep these iconic buildings like Republic Plaza is one of them, Capitol Center, 1660 Link, which is where the Denver Business Journal is, and let me tell you, the views are great.
I bet they are.
So, and again, this study is more of a 10,000 view look at what could be done and sort of maybe a first step in that big idea. Yeah, there is a lot of things that you have to address in these buildings, all kinds of things like elevators. They've looked at walkability, closeness to transit, how much light comes in these buildings. So there are a lot of factors that have to be considered.
Now, we're not talking about low-income apartments here. If you're talking about Republic Plaza, is the tallest building in Denver, the top 15 stories of that would be very pricey real estate for someone to want to live in, maybe.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing. Look, there are many challenges here, cost being one of them. I talked to an architect, Tobias Stroh, who is on one of the task force that's looking at adaptive use. And he said, first of all, you have to have a developer that knows how to do these kinds of things. Then you have to have a building seller. Now, we've seen some buildings downtown in trouble, financial trouble. Would it make more sense to sell and convert it into residential? I don't know. There's also the cost of remodeling the building. And then with the building, office rent is much more than, say, residential rent.
So are we talking about the possibility of the city, county, state, someone providing some sort of financial incentive for someone to do this? Because you're right, it would be very expensive. But would you think they'd be willing in a long-term sense to say, if you're going to make housing downtown, we'll help?
Well, it definitely has been discussed, and the city is signaling that it wants to see these projects come forward. First of all, the Downtown Denver Partnership has an adaptive reuse task force that it advises the city on things. When you're talking about changing out building codes, we're talking about buildings built in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. Building codes have changed quite a bit. So this task force is helping the city determine what they can look at as far as, modifications, what administrative modifications, where if a developer goes in and says, hey, I want to do this, it's not going to cost them all the money in the world. They can maybe get around a code or two as long as it preserves life safety. The other thing is that the city has come forward with an adaptive reuse pilot program. And what they're doing is taking, a program coordinator to match up with the developer and walk them through the process of permitting, the review process, and all of that.
Adaptive reuse, we're going to hear more about this for sure.
I'm thinking Chicago, New York, and LA is like what this is sounding like to me.
It's a nationwide thing. It's definitely a nationwide thing, and it's nothing new. We've always repurposed buildings, and we have a lot of that on the Denver Business Journal's website. So if you want to go look at it, you can do that.
Check it out.
Check it out there. It's always good to see you. Thanks, Chris.
Good to see you too. Thanks.